I think the NPCSC's decision has got nothing to do with the state of democracy in Hong Kong. The decision is necessary to preserve the integrity of the one country, two systems. Basically, it is a very simple question. Would you allow people who do not believe in the one country, two systems to continue to serve, both in LegCo or in other official position, given that under the Basic Law it is clearly stipulated that anyone who serve publicly, be it the Chief Executive or Executive Council members or judges or members of the LegCo. Now that has been interpreted both by the NPCSC nationally and by the High Court in Hong Kong as meaning substantively the person must harbor an intention to uphold the Basic Law. In other words, to uphold the one country, two systems. If by legal process that person is found not to be prepared to uphold the Basic Law, constitutionally he has no right to remain in the office. Now what has happened therefore is that 4 legislators had been found by the election officer in July that they did not have the intention to uphold the Basic Law. That being the position, as a matter of law and as a matter of constitutional requirement, they cannot continue to serve. Now, that, however, doesn't mean that any other member of the Democratic camp cannot continue to serve in LegCo. That is not the effect of the NPCSC. The effect that all pan-Democrats decided to leave LegCo is a political decision on their part. And therefore it has got nothing to do with the central government or the SAR government not allowing the pan-Democrats to remain in LegCo. So there is no connection between the NPCSC decision and the fact that the pan-Democrats decided to leave LegCo en masse. Now, as to the future, if they wish to return to LegCo, there is nothing to prevent them from doing so. However, the constitutional requirement that any candidate must have the intention to uphold the Basic Law is still there. I would imagine if somebody, for example in the United States, were to say that my political ideal or political goal is to fight for the disintegration of the federal system in the United States, I'm sure that he will not allow to serve in the US Congress. Likewise, if a member of parliament in London were to say that my political goal is to abolish the monarchy, to set up an entirely different political system and to do without the parliamentary system in the UK, then again, I don't think they can swear allegiance to the UK government and therefore will not be allowed to serve. So in Hong Kong, we are looking at precisely the same thing. Under the one country, two systems, any legislator do not have to swear allegiance to the central government. All they need to do is to swear allegiance to the SAR government. To be precise, to serve allegiance to the SAR, Hong Kong SAR. I'm a firm believer of freedom of speech. But I think that freedom of speech must not be abused by spreading lies or spreading misinformation or untruths. I do not myself agree with the approach of the Western media. I do understand that they have a political aim to serve, but I would expect that any criticism of the SAR government and of China should be based on facts. And if the criticisms are not based on facts, I think there is a duty on the part of SAR government and the central government to lay out the facts, to show to the world that the criticisms are either wholly untrue or unfair. Hong Kong is a pluralistic community. We enjoy freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and we think that anyone is entitled to hold a different opinion from that of the SAR government. But so long as they stay true to the one country, two systems, and are prepared to uphold the basic law, I think that the fact that you are the opposition doesn't mean that you are not allowed to advocate different viewpoints or even oppose certain policies or bills to be promoted by the government. But being the opposition doesn't mean that you have to oppose each and every policy, each and every legislation. If that is the case, I see no purpose for you to remain in LegCo. You can do that outside of LegCo as well. In LegCo, I think you have a duty to serve the community. You are not serving the government, but you are serving the entirety of Hong Kong. You are serving the people of Hong Kong. And you must remember that the people of Hong Kong comprises of people both in support of the government and those who may not be in support of the government. If you simply were to deny everything tabled by the government in LegCo, I don't think you're serving the people of Hong Kong fairly and truly. So I would expect a legislator to deal with each question, each issue, each policy, and each legislation as fairly as they can, taking into account the broad interests of the whole of Hong Kong. I think that is the role of a genuine legislator. I think the centrist approach is an approach which is used by the media. I would prefer to describe my political belief to be a balanced approach. What it means is that you are serving the whole of Hong Kong. Therefore, in respect of every issue, you should adopt a balanced approach. There are always pros and cons in relation to each issue, and you have to weigh out each time which is the better way to proceed. I think that is the way to go in terms of Hong Kong politics. We don't necessarily need opposition, but we do need people with a balanced approach. With the Pan-Democrats leaving LegCo, does it mean that LegCo would become one voice? I don't think so, because I do believe there are legislators, be they generally in support of the government or not, who would be in a position or knows how to approach every issue in a balanced way. The other way to look at it is that even among the pro-government political parties, they are running the direction of going through direct election as one of the necessary way to get into LegCo. And as somebody looking at general election or direct election, I do believe that even political parties said to be in support of the government would be able to take into account the viewpoint of the man in the street. And therefore, they will not necessarily be a rubber stamp of all issues proposed by the government. They would be able to reflect the general view of the public, I hope, and they would also be in a position to provide the necessary check and balances towards the government. I hope I'm not wrong in assessing the situation in this way. Time will tell. If there are members from our think tank who wants to run for election, and if we think that they are up to the job, then we would recommend them to the public. We do not necessarily regard ourselves as pro-government or pro-democracy. We are pro a balanced approach. In other words, there would be situations where if the balanced approach dictates that we should side with the Pan-Democrats, then we would do so. If the balanced approach means that we would have to side with the government, then we would do so. In other words, we're not dictated by where you stand on each side, but how to approach the question fairly, and in a balanced way the best we can. There are people who describe us as being, mid of the road or centrists. We don't care about these labels, but we do believe that in Hong Kong we need people to take a balanced view of politics and not to go to either extremes. This year, before the postponement of the election, I had told my members that this is not a year for them to take part in the election because the community is too divided. The position is too extreme on either side, and therefore this may not be the right time to get into the fight between the pro-government people and the pan-democrats. With the pandemic postponing the election for 1 year, I think there is room for us to review our situation. The political situation in Hong Kong has changed, whether it would be more favorable for people like ourselves to get involved in running for LegCo seats. So I think we would defer answering that question. Hopefully the political situation would become clearer before next summer. Over the last 3 years, my think tank, the Path to Democracy, has continuously carried out opinion polls of the people in Hong Kong. And consistently, close to 80% of the people in Hong Kong would like to see the one country, two systems continue beyond 2047. Now this year we have undertaken another project to look specifically into the question of 2047. I do believe the number one concern of anyone in Hong Kong is to consider how to improve our conditions so that there is a good chance that one country, two systems would continue. In other words, this is the number one priority of the people in Hong Kong, maybe even more than democratic reform. Because if the democratic reform would bring about distrust between Hong Kong people and the central government, which would then affect the question of whether we can continue the one country, two systems, then on the balancing of the pros and cons, I would prefer that we concentrate on improving the condition of enabling one country, two systems to continue, rather than to think single-handedly about democratic reform and nothing else. This is what I call the balanced approach. Therefore, I hope that all political parties and anybody who wants to run for LegCo would keep this in mind. Our number one priority is to improve our chances of continuing one country, two systems, if possible, beyond 2047.
Thank you very much.